All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining this workshop, Difficult Conversations and How to Navigate Them During the Holidays. My name is Sabrina. I'm the program director at the Eating Disorder Foundation, which is a part of the Colorado Community Collaborative for Eating Disorders. We're comprised of a few other organizations in the Denver community: the Eating Recovery Center, Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center, ED Care, and Grace Phyllis Recovery Consulting. There's a couple of the collaborative organizers here, and so thank you all for being here and for joining. The mission of our collaborative is to create opportunities for connection, for education and awareness among communities that are affected and impacted by eating disorders, not only in Colorado, but beyond. So we're grateful to be here virtually this evening. I'd like to quickly thank everyone who was able to contribute a donation to the workshop. This allows the collaborative to continue providing speakers and education and more opportunities for connection. Because we are recording tonight, the chat feature is going to be set to private. If you have questions or comments during the presentation this evening, you should be able to chat myself directly, or there's another co-host, Emma from ERC, and either one of us will kind of collect the questions until the end of the presentation, and then we'll deliver them directly to the speaker. And we'll get to as many of those as we can. And now I am very honored to introduce Bryn Miller. Bryn is a licensed professional counselor, a certified eating disorder specialist supervisor, and a certified advanced therapist in emotion-focused family therapy. Bryn provides compassionate and evidence-based care to adolescents and adults that are struggling with eating disorders. With expertise in both family-based therapy and emotion-focused family therapy, Bryn specializes in care that includes parents and caregivers in treatment in a way that brings support and healing to the whole family. With a deep empathy, along with her signature high energy and humor, Bryn utilizes interventions that are concrete tools and skills to individuals and to their loved ones. Bryn is the owner of Bryn Miller Therapy Services, an outpatient practice based in Denver, that in addition to weekly sessions, provides psychoeducation to parents and caregivers across the country through virtual skills groups and workshops. Bryn provides one of those workshops through EDF as well. So you can find how to participate more and learn more of those skills from Bryn on the Eating Disorder Foundation's website. And when Bryn is not working, reading, meditating, skiing, and trying to keep up with her 2 young children, and maybe successfully or unsuccessfully sometimes. Bryn, thank you so much for being here. I'm very excited to learn more from you and to be with everybody here this evening.
Awesome. Sabrina, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I realize when you put in your bio that you're, high energy and you're going to bring your humor, it kind of sets the bar high. So maybe I'll take that out next time in case, you guys don't think I'm funny. But it's so great to see you. It's so the handful of faces that I can see. I like to pretend we're all in the same room together. And so thank you guys for being here. This is a huge honor. And I'm just thrilled and very grateful to the collaborative for having me here. So I am going to pull my screen up and we'll go ahead and get started here. All right. If somebody can just give me a thumbs up that you guys can see the screen, you can see me, we're all good. Technology is not my strong suit, but if we're here, that's all that matters. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and get right started. Welcome. Thank you. This is an honor. This talk, if you've ever come to one of my talks before, this will not surprise you, but this talk is designed to be interactive. So if you don't have a pen and paper with you, take a minute and run and go and grab it. My goal for this, for you all, is that you leave tonight with papers full of skills and tools and ideas. I want this to be very, like I said, interactive and applicable and concrete in terms of feeling like you're walking out of here with some ideas of how to manage this time of year. So as we go through, you will see write this down in green a bunch of times. And so if you are open to working in this way, if you're up for working in this way, please join me. And if you're not, that's okay. I get it. You know, we're all in different places. We're all coming to this with, you know, different things happening in our lives. And so if you're like, Bryn, I just cannot deal with that right now, that's okay. Just hang out and, you know, absorb as much as you can. And if you are a parent or a caregiver or a loved one here on behalf of someone that you love, I want you to walk through the steps as we go for yourself. So not thinking about like, what are the skills my loved one would use, but I want you to think about what are the skills that I would use. Because if you are refueling, if you are taking care of yourself, if you are using some of these tools, you are going to be a greater support to the people that you love. So put yourself kind of in the driver's seat in this, even if you're here to support someone else, because that will support the other person that you're here for. As I said, you do you, take care of yourself. I want you to honor where you are today and be as involved or as, you know, chill as you need to be. And also take what's useful and ignore what's not. We are all going to be coming to this with incredibly different experiences and backgrounds and worries and fears and hopes and expectations. And so I've designed this in a way that it should kind of capture what your unique experience is. But I'm going to throw things out there that you're going to say, I would never do that. And that's stupid. Great. Don't do it. We have this saying, which is if what you're doing is working, keep doing it. Like ignore me, you know yourself better. And so if I throw something out there, but you've already got a system for it, please keep doing what is working for you. You are the expert on you, right? And then just a little disclaimer that these are meant to provide information and support, not intended to provide mental health treatment and do not constitute a client-therapist relationship. That's a little legal jumbo. Okay. I want everyone to start with a 2-word check-in. So again, I like to pretend that we're all in the room together, in which case we would all just, you know, share where we're at, but take a second and see if you can find 2 words that describe where you're at, how you're feeling. And if you can, kind of think about it as connecting with neck down. What do you feel in your body? What do you notice? What are the emotions that are coming up? And so I will go. I am stoked and I am honored. Those are 2 words that kind of, you know, encapsulate where I'm at right now. So take a second, check in. This is a skill that you can use during this time of year. We get going, we get crazy. Give yourself a tiny pause and just say, if I had 2 words that would describe how I'm feeling right now, what are they? And take a deep breath. One of the beautiful things about virtual is that we can all be here together. And one of the tough things about it is that, you know, 2 minutes ago, you might have been running around doing something else. So we're here together for an hour. Take a deep breath, give yourself permission to be here and to be in this space and know that everything that you've left on the other side of the door will be there waiting for you when you're done. And really do what you can to be here now, to give this time to yourself. So big deep breath, also something you can use. So I want you to think about 1 or 2 scenarios or conversations that you are most nervous about when you think about this time of year, right? The title of the talk is Difficult Conversations. How are we going to navigate it? What's going to come up in the holidays, right? This is going to be really different for everybody. So think about 1 or 2, if there's 2, when you think about this time of year and you imagine yourself kind of going through all of this, what are the moments that sort of make your stomach flip because they're really hard, or that you're really scared about, or you're like, how am I going to manage that? And on the top of your paper, I want you to write them down. So I'll give everyone a minute to do these. I'm not going to give you a ton of time because I always try and cram too much into every talk. That's how I roll. But if I move on too quickly, just put a little star next to it and come back to it. Or if it's a place where you get stuck, come back, right? But some scenarios, some conversations, just to kind of get your thoughts going if you're feeling stuck. Someone makes a comment to you about your food or your eating or your body or your treatment or what you're doing in your life, right? This seems to be a big thing that comes up this time of year. Being involved in religious or cultural traditions that ask you to eat in a certain way that might be incongruent with your recovery process, right? Seeing friends, seeing family, going back, home, whatever that looks like, all the memories that can drag up, all the triggers, our tendency to kind of get into old patterns when we go into places that we come from, if you will, or not seeing friends, not seeing family, not having loved ones around, and this maybe being the first time you're going through this time of year without them, right? Being estranged from people, not being connected to people anymore, feeling isolated, right? New Year's, everything that gets kicked up around the New Year's in terms of diet culture and all of that garbage, if I can say. Travel, lack of structure, change to routine, right? There's a gajillion things that could be coming up. So those are just some of my ideas. I'll throw things out there. Again, if you've got something that hits for you, please use that. So put that at the top. This is going to be our roadmap as we kind of move through this. So this is this great James Clear quote that I love because I'm a dork. The ultimate form of preparation is not planning for a specific scenario, but a mindset that can handle uncertainty. And so I use that sort of as a framework for this talk. I want you to have a specific scenario, but I want to give you a mindset that you can bring to any of these scenarios, in part so that it feels helpful to all of you individuals out there that are handling different things, but also so that you feel like it's a tool that's flexible, right? So what I want to do is start first with where we get stuck, right? So I'm going to walk through this little model I built. What we're going to have is you right in the middle, right? So there you are, just hanging out, minding your own business. I'm going to put you in a triangle, and you're going to see why in a second. But also, it's not just you in your world, right? It's all the other people in your world. And so take a second and kind of think about who that is for you, who are the other folks in your life, right? And when we approach this time of year, there's a handful of things that are really common that happen. One of them is we show up with expectations. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we show up with expectations in terms of how we are supposed to be, but we also show up with expectations about how other people are supposed to be. So as we kind of move through this little model, I want you to think that we can talk about how we're handling it internally, but also in between us and other people, because that's another way that this kind of all gets kicked up this time of year in particular. We also tend to show up with criticism. Again, for ourselves and for others, right? And then another thing that can be really hard is having a lack of limits. And this can look like a lot of different things. We can show up with a lack of limits on ourselves, right? A lack of holding structure or accountability for ourselves, but also, of course, having limits and boundaries with other people, right? So this can be the compass we sometimes bring to the holidays, and we can already see how that might be a little tricky, but we're going to talk through each of these and then talk through what's an alternative, right? So let's talk about expectations. What are your expectations about this situation? When you look at your piece of paper and you think about this conversation or this scenario that you're nervous about, what are the expectations that show up? And I'll give you a few sentence starters in case you get stuck. Often expectations will come in the form of I should or I shouldn't. It will often sound like they should or they shouldn't. And it can even be the holidays should or shouldn't be. X, Y, and Z, right? So give yourself a second to write these down. I'll again I've got my little papers here. I'll throw some ideas out at you. But again, tune me out, listen to yourself, use these if you get stuck. Even things of like, I should enjoy this time of year, right? I should be grateful for X, Y, and Z. I should be able to do this thing or that thing, quote unquote, normally, right? Or like, quote unquote, everyone else, right? I should enjoy my friends. I should enjoy my family. I should be relaxed. All of these ideas. I shouldn't be so stressed. I shouldn't have to deal with this. I shouldn't hate doing this. They should get it by now. They should understand why this is hard for me. They should be more supportive. They should respect my boundaries. They shouldn't talk about food and diets and bodies because I've asked them a million times, right? They shouldn't be so critical. The holidays should be nice, right? And sometimes they can be anything but. So take a second. What are some of the expectations that show up? Oh, I know how this is going to go. This is what they always do. This is what they never do, right? Of course, we have expectations. Expectations are inevitable, normal, and actually can be adaptive. This helps us figure out how to move through the world, that we know what is coming, right? It helps us to expect what's happening and how to prepare. And expectations can be very tricky, right? Sometimes this is how it can feel. When they're rigid, when they're out of our awareness, and then they're emotionally loaded, expectations can really block us from what's actually happening or how we're really feeling. And we lose access to what's happening for us emotionally because we're so stuck in our shoulds, right? And they can really backfire, whether they're good, like, oh, this is going to be perfect, and then it's not because it never is, or this is going to be horrible. And then we go in with this sort of energy or this dread around something. So we also have criticism this time of year. What is your critical voice going to say about this situation or this scenario? And I want you to think of it in two parts: self-critical, and if your situation involves someone else, other critical, right? I don't have to give you ideas probably to get in touch with your inner critic. They're usually pretty vocal. If yours is anything like mine, at least. And so, what is the way that your inner critic is going to show up to say, oh, this thing is happening because you this. You're not good enough. You're not worthy. You didn't this, you didn't that, right? And then how is it going to show up to be critical of the other person in the situation? They this, they that. Again, they never, they always. We all have this critic. We compare ourselves and our loved ones. We get judgmental of ourselves and other people. And we belittle our feelings and the feelings of the people around us when we're in this critical space, right? And it's just what our brains are wired to do. Unfortunately, they're really good at this. What's tricky about this, what the downside is, and I probably don't have to tell you this already, is that it can get in the way of coming to yourself and other people with compassion and empathy. It takes what's hard. Like, I think about this being like the pile of crap that is hard, and it piles this much more stuff on top of that when we get really self-critical and really judgmental of ourselves and other people, as opposed to just having already this much stuff to manage, right? It makes what's hard worse and harder. And it can also get in the way of seeing our own pain and seeing the pain in others. And then, of course, there's a lack of limits, right? So how will you struggle to set limits for yourself? And I want you to think about this along the lines of accountability. So when I say limits of yourself, I don't mean like controlling yourself. I mean making sure that you're doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. What does accountability look like for you? What are the things that you know you need to have in your week or in your day to manage what you're dealing with in your life? How are you going to struggle to follow through on those things during this time of year? And it can be as simple as my schedule's all crazy, right? Throws things off. How are you going to struggle to show up for yourself in the way that you know you need to, because it's this time of year? And how will you struggle to set limits with others? And you can think about this more along the lines of boundaries. How am I going to set limits with other people? How am I going to struggle? And just take a little note of that, of like, I'm going to, throw my own schedule out the window to make sure I'm available for everyone else. That's a nice little combo of struggling to set the limits for yourself and with other people, right? I love this because this is like so spot on of like, you're like in your therapy session and you're like, yeah, okay, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, and it's going to be great. Right. And then you get thrown into these situations and it's like, what? Oh God, it's all out the window. Right. So we're going to try and mitigate that a little bit. So it makes sense to have a lack of limits because limits are so hard. This is so challenging. So take a second and ask yourself, what is the fear? What is the worry? If I set limits with myself, I've tried to hold myself accountable, then what? Then maybe I'll fail. Then I'll be even more judgmental of myself if I don't follow through on it, right? What's the worry? And this one's really, really important. If I set limits with others, especially anyone else that's involved in that conversation or the scenario at the very top of your paper that you wrote down that you're thinking about, if I set limits with them about this, then what? And there's usually a lot of fear and worry about this. And sometimes, I wouldn't say sometimes, I would say almost all the time, it's for good reason. There's a good reason you're worried about setting these limits with someone. Maybe it hasn't been responded to very well in the past, right? Maybe you've always gotten pushback. It doesn't get respected. Maybe you get made fun of even when you try and do this. There is a good reason that there is fear and worry in this. The world is not designed to honor our limits and boundaries. In fact, it is designed to push on all of them, right? So this is hard. And a big part of this, if you leave here tonight with one thing, it's that I want you to be able to come to yourself with compassion when you struggle to set these limits that you want to be able to set, because it's really hard. What's tricky about not having limits is that it's also really hard, right? So ask yourself, what is the cost or the downside of a lack of limits? If I don't hold myself accountable, if I don't set limits with other people, then what? Because there's usually a cost there as well. And there might be a cost associated with setting the limits, of course, right? But there's almost always a cost to not setting the limits. Even if it's that you feel out of touch with your authentic self, you feel disingenuous, you feel resentful, you feel pissed. There's a lot of ways this can show up. You feel taken advantage of. You feel like you're not taking care of yourself. Anyone overwhelmed yet? Anyone like really excited for the holidays? So we talk about what's hard and what's tricky so that we have awareness around it. So you've just created a map for your holiday struggles, right? Like, what are my expectations? What is my criticism? How is my limits setting going to get in the way, right? We know, now we know. And so even if the talk was over right now, and don't worry, it's not, we're going to talk about tools and ways to manage this. Just when we increase our awareness around this, that's a huge first step, because then you can anticipate it, right? You know it's coming. You can also normalize it for yourself. If any of this resonated with you, it's because we all go through this. We all struggle with various aspects of this. So normalize it for yourself. You can label it when it happens. Oh, there were my unrealistic expectations making me super disappointed on how this turned out, right? Oh, cool. We talked about this. I knew this was going to happen, right? It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It doesn't mean it's not painful when it does, but we can label it, we can understand it. And our brain likes that because then it knows what's going on, right? And we can plan for it. We can get out ahead of it. And that's going to be what the rest of what we're going to do tonight. So what is the alternative to this struggle bus map? It's the same roadmap, but we're going to have a new compass. We're going to have a new way to approach it. And rather having this perfect roadmap for the future that we think we need, we're going to have a compass. We're going to have a general direction that we walk in. And so we're going to look at that right back with having you here in the middle again. Okay. Put you back in that triangle. Now you know why. You've got your people in your life out here hanging out, right? Instead of expectations, we're going to try and cultivate curiosity. And instead of criticism, we're going to try and use validation, which if you know me, you know this is my favorite thing in the book, right? And we're going to talk about setting limits. How do we set limits? What does it look like? What gets in the way? So this is the compass that we could bring to the holidays. So let's talk about curiosity. So look back at your expectations list, right? Like one of the first things we wrote down was like, I should this, I shouldn't that, they should, they shouldn't, the holidays should be awesome, da, 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 right? Take a look at that list. Just glance over it for a second. Imagine that this list belonged to someone else. That you like found this laying on the ground, right? And you just picked it up. What are the feelings and themes that you notice? Jot something down, and it can be a few words. Like when I look at my list of my things, it's very self-critical about not enjoying myself. And so that's a theme that comes up. Like, you better be grateful and having the best time ever. Otherwise you're the worst, right? That's the critic and the expectations. So what do you notice? And if you were to look at it again, like it's not yours, like it's someone else's, and it's a book report, and your, high school English teacher is like, what are the themes, right? What do you notice? And can you come to it with a sense of curiosity, or like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to ask you guys to do an exercise that's going to feel really silly. I want you to take your list of expectations, or if it's in a notebook or whatever you're using, and I want you to literally look at it and reread them. And I want you to hold the piece of paper directly in front of your face so that you can read your expectations, but it's like right here. So it's in between the screen and you, but you can read it, and you're just reading it over and over and over again. Okay. And as you're doing this, I want you to notice if you can take in what's going on around you, how hard it is. Like, can you see me? Like, you guys can't even see me. You don't know what's happening on my face, right? I'm holding this paper. I can't engage in the world around me, right? It's getting in the way. Yep. Totally. Love it, Sabrina. It's getting in the way, right? We can't even, you've got your list. Exactly. And it's really hard to see you or to know what's happening. Now, if we take this same list, this exact same list, and you just put it in your lap where you can still read it, right? You can still see all the things that I should do and shouldn't be doing, right? They're right here. They didn't go away, but I can see you guys again. And I can see the room that I'm in. And I could hold a baby or kiss a puppy or, engage with the people around me, right? And so they didn't go away. They're right here, but we're engaging with them differently. They're not blocking us, right? And so when we put it on your lap, you're more present, you're more aware, you're more adaptable. And so this is an acceptance and commitment therapy idea of diffusion, of how do we just take a step back and be aware of these things without having to change them. I didn't change anything on the piece of paper. It's still all the same stuff. I'm just relating to it differently, right? So when you notice yourself in all of that stuff, write it down on a piece of paper and imagine holding it right in front of you, and then put it in your lap. You could do it in your mind even, of like, what would it be like to take all this stuff that's in my brain and just put it in my lap so that I can interact with my world differently, right? And then lastly, asking yourself, what is the story my brain is telling me about this? So when we go in with expectations, right? I'm going to get this amazing gift. And that means that this person loves me so much, right? That's a story that my brain has fabricated about what this gift means and what it means in terms of what the person is telling me about how they feel about me, right? That's a narrative. Can we just be aware of these things as narratives? So if we can create a little space between what we think is going to happen and what is actually happening, we can take care of ourselves better, no matter what happens. Right? Because when we come in with these expectations, it's like having blinders on, and then it's harder to access what is actually happening for me. And what might be happening is really different than what you think should be happening. I went on a vacation last year to Florida, and the weather was beautiful, and we're at the beach, and we're there with all these other families and kids, and it should have been amazing and relaxing. And I got back and I was telling a friend about it, and they're like, "You seem really stressed and anxious." And I was like, no, I couldn't be stressed and anxious. I was just on vacation, I was in Florida. And they're like, oh no, you're definitely stressed and anxious. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I am. And my idea of it, my expectation of it blocked my ability to check in with myself and go, oh yeah, I was on vacation with like 27 kids under the age of 6. That was a nightmare. Like, of course I'm stressed out, right? And then I can help myself because I know what's going on. I'm not blocked from that, right? So we can also bring curiosity to the people around us. And this can be really hard. I'm going to throw out some ideas tonight about ways to interact with other people. And I want to make a little disclaimer here, which is that depending on your situation, depending on your relationships, this might not be feasible. This might not even be recommended for you. You might need to focus much more on how do I take care of myself and set these boundaries, right? Sometimes coming to other people with curiosity or with validation that can be useful. There are times where you need to absolutely prioritize taking care of yourself. And so if that is a situation that you're in, I want you to honor that and feel free to kind of put this on the shelf and use in maybe a different setting. And so just acknowledging that there are very, very different levels of situations that everyone might be dealing with right now. And so this might not be an appropriate tool if what we're talking about is we really need to focus on you and taking care of you. So if it's more like, oh, my Aunt Sally's going to show up doing this and that, it's going to drive me bonkers, then maybe this is a tool that can help, right? So go back, take a look at your scenarios, and imagine if there's another person involved in your scenario. Could you come to them with that behavior, with what they're coming to you at, and say something in your head? That's interesting. That's interesting. I wonder why they're showing up like that. I wonder what's going on for them that they think it's okay to comment about what I'm doing or how I look or what's happening with my treatment or my romantic life or my job or whatever. Like, how interesting that they think that that's appropriate, right? I wonder what this is about for them. I wonder what's going on. Can we come to them with a detached, if you will, like curiosity, like a scientist, almost like, oh, how fascinating. Like you're discovering the dinosaurs or something, like, oh, this is so interesting. Does this bone go here? Does that mean they had a, like horn over here? Right. I don't know. I don't know anything about dinosaurs other than what my 5-year-old tells me, which is clear, obviously. But can we come with this genuine curiosity, right? How fascinating. How interesting is it that we live in a culture where people think it's okay to comment about other people's bodies? How fascinating that is. Wow. Okay. It's just a little bit different of an approach than going into this place where it's like, oh, of course, I knew she was going to do that again because she always does that, right? So if any of these feel like they resonate with you and you're like, okay, maybe I could kick that around in my head, maybe that helps me a little bit, get a little bit of distance and sort of be able to also sort of depersonalize whatever it is that's coming at us in that scenario from someone else. Jot that down. Okay, so we talked about curiosity. Now we're going to talk about validation. And validation is going to start with validating yourself. This is step one. because validation can be a good antidote to criticism and that self-critic that can get really strong and really nasty. It helps us know what we're feeling and that it's okay to feel what we're feeling, no matter what it is. Now, notice I didn't say it's okay to behave however you want those feelings to tell you to behave, right? I'm not saying like you get to throw the, Christmas dishes across the dining room table or whatever because you're mad, but it can start with, oh, I'm mad. Oh, and it makes sense that I'm mad and it's okay that I'm mad, right? And then how we want to deal with it is the next piece of it, right? But to just start with, what am I feeling? And to know it's okay to feel that way, that it makes sense, that there's probably a good reason that gets kicked up in you, can really change how you move forward. So when you start with knowing your feelings are valid, it's a new launching pad from which to help yourself. So think about your scenario again, right? It makes sense that I feel angry, feel sad, feel overwhelmed, feel livid, feel frustrated, feel lonely, feel isolated, whatever it is. Or it doesn't have to be a feeling. It can be, it makes sense that I don't want to see my family because. It could be, it makes sense that I feel like it's not worth it because, right? Whatever it is, because I want to, because I don't want to, because I feel this, that, or the other thing, whatever resonates with you, and give yourself one reason why, like, yeah, of course, it makes sense why anyone in my shoes in this situation would feel this way, or would want to avoid this situation, or would want to get defensive when this happens. And if you have a situation where you're like, I can't find one because for myself, put it in the chat. We'll talk about it at the Q&A, because I have yet to come across a situation where I can't find a part of us where it makes sense that we feel the way that we feel. It's there for a reason. It doesn't necessarily mean it's totally rational or logical, right? But feelings aren't. That's okay. We're not saying it's rational and logical. We're just saying it makes sense that it's there. And there's a reason for it, right? Again, same caveat as criticism. If this is appropriate for you, can you do validation with others? Can you think about your scenario and say, it makes sense that they X, Y, and Z, whatever it is that they're doing, right? Or that you're worried they're going to do, or you think they're going to do, because. And before you write it down, I want to really, really underline that validation is not agreement. So saying, I can understand why my mom, X, Y, and Z, does not mean it's okay that she did it. It doesn't mean that she's right that she did it. It just means that I can understand it. I can see her. I can hear her. I understand. I get why she might feel that way. I can understand this from her perspective. Or I can put myself in your shoes. Even if I could not, I categorically disagree in every fiber of my being with how you've handled this or how you're managing this, that I can still say, it makes sense that they, X, Y, and Z, because. And I will tell you, having worked with thousands of caregivers and loved ones, so often the things that they do that are the most upsetting are because they think they're being helpful. Is this always the case? No, I'm not able to say that. Is it so often because they're worried about you? Is it the right way to go about it? Is it the right way to handle it? Often not, right? Of course. But oftentimes that behavior, that thing that they do, if it's someone else in your life, is so often related because they want to help, because they think they're helping. And so if that resonates with you at all, that can be something too that can really help you de-escalate in a moment where it feels like, are you kidding me? You're going to come at me with the X, Y, Z for real? Does this person think in some way, on some level, in some part of their brain that they're helping. And maybe not, right? But maybe, and it might be something to think about, might be something to get curious about. Another thing that can help is remembering that the people in our lives are all victims of the toxic culture that we live in, just like we are. Your friends, your family, your loved ones, the coworker at the office, the guy at Starbucks, whoever it is, right? We all breathe this same air when it comes to messages about food and bodies and what's good and bad and what's right and wrong. And so this could look like, I can understand why you might have those ideas like fat bias and weight stigma and glorifying diet culture, because we all live in this same toxic culture that tells us unequivocally that some bodies are more valuable than other bodies. And so if that can help you, again, take it a little less personally when you're getting some of this, put that in your pocket, because it's true. Again, and I think, like I said, having worked with so many loved ones and caregivers, especially if they don't have an understanding of the way this toxic culture has been fed to us, their attempts to help, quote unquote, help, can look like this, can feel like this, and they can feel really bad and feel really critical, right? And so just in the same way that you have been victimized by this culture, so has everyone you love, everyone around you that cares about you too. So again, if that helps. Does it excuse behavior? Absolutely not. But it can help us sometimes understand and make it feel a little less personal. All right, so our last one, setting limits. Let's talk about setting limits. I'm going to set limits with myself and make sure I'm done on time. Ready? So we talked about the struggles, we talked about the fears, and we talked about the cost when it comes to setting limits. This is the hardest, trickiest one. And I would say not just the hardest, trickiest thing about the holidays, but in some ways, I think it is the hardest, trickiest thing about being a human being person in this world, interacting with other human being people in this world. What are the limits that you want to be able to set, thinking about this scenario or thinking about going into this time of year? And how can we help you take a step in that direction? So we're going to start with setting limits with yourself, which is this idea of like accountability. What are the limits you want to be able to set for yourself? What do I need in order to take care of myself? Knowing all of this stuff that's coming down the pipeline, right? And this often looks like accountability to your treatment, your recovery, and your self-care plans. So there's two ways that I want us to think about this so we can get kind of specific about it. And the first one I call calendar coping, because I literally want you to put it on your calendar. And so when you think about the next 2 months or whatever this gauntlet we're entering now in terms of the holidays, what can you put on your calendar to help you take care of yourself? What is the EDF support groups that you are going to go to in the next 3 weeks to make sure you feel like you've got that support, right? Is it your daily meditation that you're going to do every morning and not compromise on it, or 90%? I never say, I think shooting for perfection is never a good idea. So, like 90%, right? Is it a bedtime ritual that just feels good and that helps you kind of ground yourself before you go to sleep? Is it your therapy appointments that you're going to try and keep those as consistent as you possibly can, given all the craziness of the holidays, or meeting with your dietitian or that group that you go to, right? Is it a call with a friend of like, okay, these 3 days are going to be particularly hard for me. Can I call you at noon on this day and we can just talk? Or we can just like be silly and talk about something else, or you can just sit on the phone with me while we watch a TV show together. Is this some kind of yoga class that you really like to go to? Is this an art class? I mean, anything that you can plan ahead and put it on your calendar and like literally plug it into your Google Calendar or in your day planner if you're old school, whatever it is, I want you to mark it on a day. And I want you to think about this and then commit to it when the time comes, whether you feel like it or not. So I want you to think of one calendar coping that you can do. And then we have crisis coping. And this is something that you can do in the moment when you don't really have access to anything, when something flies up out of the blue and feels like it sort of smacks you in the face, right? And so do you have a go-to breathing exercise? I know I sound like every other therapist on earth, but like it's real. The breathing thing is real. Find a good breathing exercise. It can literally be like in for 5 and out for 7, but have one. It is real in terms of how it helps your body. It's another talk, but trust me. Having some diffusion skills, like we talked about earlier, can you step back and say, I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that this is going to go horribly. I'm noticing I'm having the thought that I don't want to do this. I am aware of what's happening in my body in terms of my feelings. What is happening? Where is the tension in my body? Is this like a go-to awesome fidget tool that you keep in your purse or your backpack, or in your car, whatever it is? Is this a hot shower? Is this splashing cold water on your face? Something that you have easy access to, that you don't need anyone else for, and that you can again access kind of like anytime, anywhere, in a crisis, in a moment when you need it. A playlist that like hypes you up, or a playlist that calms you down. I literally will just go into Spotify and Google spa music. Google in Spotify. I search in Spotify. I told you guys the technology, it's not a thing for me. And just listen to quote spa music, because it helps calm down my nervous system when I'm revved up, right? So one of each, write it down, use it, revisit it. Don't ignore this after the end of this talk. Put it in your calendar, find your crisis coping. And then of course, setting limits with others, right? What are the limits that you want to be able to set with other people as it pertains to this conversation or this scenario, or again, this time of year? What do I need to do with the other people in my life to take care of myself? This will look like boundaries. This will look like saying no to things and to people and to requests. And it might look like taking space, which can be like, literally, I need 5 minutes in the parking lot and then I can come back. It might be, no, I'm not going to see you this year because I'm not in the place where I think that that's a good idea for me. So taking space has a big spectrum, right? What do you need? What do you know you need to take care of yourself? Write it down. And then I want you to also notice if there's judgment about how hard this feels, because that's going to show up. Like, I know I need to set this boundary and it feels impossible. Right? Again, come to yourself with kindness and compassion when this feels hard. There's a reason this feels hard. It's like swimming upstream. It is so challenging, especially if us setting limits and boundaries is new to the people in our life. Ooh, that can kick up some feelings in those other people in our life, right? That's okay. That's theirs to manage. And it's likely going to kick up stuff in us, because it kicks up stuff in them. It's how we work when we're in relationship with each other, right? So I love this quote. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. And Prentice Hemphill, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but I absolutely love this quote. And this idea that boundaries are about, I love you, but also I love me. And I need to be able to love me in order to love you. And where's the space at which I can do both of those things, right? Because if it's just, I can love you, but I can't love me there, that doesn't work, right? So just like our calendar and crisis, right? What are the ways in which we can set limits with other people in advance? This can take some of the pressure off of being in the moment and feeling like you have to navigate this. So what are the conversations that you can have ahead of time to help you lay the groundwork of setting limits, right? Calling the people in your life that you're going to be around and say, hey, I would really like it if we could avoid talking about food and bodies and diets, at this like dinner that we're going to, if that's safe for you, if that's a group of people that you can ask that of. Or maybe it's one person where it's like, hey, I'm going to kick you underneath the table when this starts happening. Can you help me change the subject, right? Who can you enlist for support? Who can you talk to beforehand? Hey, last year when we were all together, this is how this went down. That's not okay for me anymore. Can we do it differently? What are you open to doing differently? What can I do differently? How do we not repeat this, right? Giving people a heads up that you will take space, giving people a heads up that you will redirect conversations. It also helps you know that when it comes down and you're trying to do those things that can feel really hard, that you've already given people a heads up that this is what's going to happen, right? And it can clear some of the groundwork for that. It might be, hey, guess what? I'm not coming. Cool. Talk to you later, right? Sometimes that is how we set limits in advance of like, this is not going to be a safe place for me. And so I won't be there this time around, right? And so how can we set limits in the moment, right? What statements do you want to have up your sleeve? What ways do you want to have to handle this, right? And this falls on this whole spectrum of like super direct to, kind of under the radar. And again, there is no shame wherever you fall on that spectrum, as long as you feel like you're honoring yourself to the best of your ability. Again, assuming that you're in a place where it's safe and you're able to do this, right? And so this might be literally, I am in treatment right now for an eating disorder, and it is incredibly inappropriate to have these conversations around me. Can we please talk about something else? And if we're not able to, I won't be here anymore. So if that to you feels like, oh my God, someone just dropped a bomb in the middle of everything, I could never do that, right? This can be further down the spectrum of like, hey guys, this is just tough for me. Let's talk about something else, right? Or it could be just changing the subject, right? Like, oh yeah, totally. What about the redirect, right? Wherever you fall on that spectrum, it's okay. And you're going to do the best you can. And it's going to feel hard, and expect that fear that you wrote down earlier to show up in these moments. Sometimes this is going to be, excuse me, and you're going to leave, and you're going to go and you're going to use one of your crisis coping skills, because that's what you can do in that moment, which is beautiful because you're honoring yourself. So write down an idea that you have for each one of these. Oh my goodness, I'm totally at time. Okay. So you can also pair this with validation. I know you think you're looking out for me, and it's not helpful when you X, Y, and Z. And sometimes that can help kind of take the sting out of it. Also, taking space is setting a limit. So that excuse me, that getting up, that walking away from the table, think about where you can get space during this time of year, because that is a limit 100%. And so 2 last things. Pay attention to feelings of anger, because that is often a signal that we need to set or defend a boundary with ourselves or with someone else. So rather than maligning anger, just be aware of it and say, is there a boundary that I need to set? What's going to kick up anger for me? And what might this be telling me? So just write like anger and put a star, and you can go back and write it down. And when it's all over and it's all said and done, process your feelings. You can't choose your family, but you can choose your therapist. This is so snarky, but I just thought it was funny, so I threw it in there. But in all seriousness, plan time and space to debrief and process after the holidays. You need and deserve support on the back end. So think about what this looks like for you. Is this a friend that you're going to call? Is this journaling? Is this a therapy session? Is this a support group? Give yourself some space to recover on the back end of it. And my one final thought, which is this time of year, like all times in our lives, is a season. It's not permanent. It's not forever. So take care of yourself and know that spring is coming, and we're not in this forever. So thank you. Thank you so much to the collaborative and to Sabrina and everyone here. And I am incredibly grateful. And Q&A and 5 minutes late. Okay. So I will stop sharing so that I can see you guys. And yeah, just open it up for questions. Sabrina, I don't know if there were anything that came through the chat, or if people want to put things in the chat now that we've kind of covered. I know that was a lot. I went through a lot of it very quickly. I have on my website, and then I'll throw that in the chat, like a written version of this And so if you want to have access to that, you can get on my website and just put your email and I will send you like the article version of this. So you have it. You can also forward it to other people if that feels helpful. And also, yes, Sabrina's saying that the recording will also be sent out to everyone too. So you'll have access if you want to, kind of move through it more slowly than I did. There is a lot in there. So feel free to like go back and, kind of go back, revisit places where we moved really quickly. So yeah, happy to take any questions if people have. I think maybe put them in the chat if that's the best way to do it. Sabrina, is that the best way to do it? Okay, cool.
It is. And I have a couple in the queue already. So,
okay, awesome. Do you want to go?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So, you talked a little bit about sometimes the tools that you were sharing about approaching with curiosity may sometimes not feel appropriate. And so we can set that aside. Along that conversation, one of the questions that we got is, besides learning or trying to approach not to take things personally and use that curiosity approach, is there something else that we can do if we're concerned that being just curious and approaching is actually then continuing to enable the negative behavior that's happening, whether it's abusive language or it's those fears and those fears of comments that we get around this diet culture and anything related that is really going to impact our own recovery. We can approach with curiosity, but then is there something else, maybe an action step if we feel safe that we can take?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I think like if you go back and kind of think about the triangle, I sort of presented it in the model like as if all sides are equal, right? Depending on the situation, the curiosity piece might be this big and the setting limits piece might be this big, right? And so if you're in a situation where, yes, there's abusive language, you are not safe, physically or psychologically, you don't feel safe, then thinking way more heavily along the setting limits and setting boundaries. Stole this from Brene Brown, but thinking about boundaries as simple as being what's okay and what's not okay. And when you're in a situation where what's happening is not okay for you, the boundary is the only answer. We don't need to go to curiosity. We don't need to go to validation. If it helps you in some way to try and understand what's happening and that feels productive in some way, great. But really, we're talking about really setting limits and boundaries when it comes to what is okay and what is not okay. And so absolutely, if this is an abusive situation, if this is a verbally abusive situation, if you're not safe, yeah, throw the other pieces out the window. This is about setting boundaries for you. You have to be able to protect yourself first and foremost. And so what does that look like? What is the action steps? I mean, this is, saying, I'm not going to X, Y, and Z. I won't be there. I will not have this conversation with you. I'm going to hang up the phone. Please don't text me. I'm going to block you. What are those steps that you need to take to ensure that you are safe, that you are able to take care of yourself when there's a person in your life that is not able to honor those boundaries? And it is really tricky and really hard to set boundaries with someone who is not willing to be respectful of your boundaries. So you have to set them and set them and set them and set them. And then you need to go take care of yourself with people that love you and support you and understand, because the energy that it takes to continuously set these boundaries is so immense. It's so draining. And so get your cup filled up by the people that do that for you and continue to set those boundaries and those limits, because I'm going to butcher this quote. I think it was Viola Davis. But along the lines of like, if it's, is this going to be uncomfortable for you or is this going to be uncomfortable for me? It's going to be uncomfortable for you, because my job first is I have to take care of myself. And so whatever makes you feel empowered enough to take those steps, that's where you get your cup filled up. and taking those steps and then talking about, ooh, that feels really scary, or that feels really hard, or there's retaliation for that, because there probably will be. And what else are you going to do? What's the cost, again, of not setting that boundary if you're not safe, if you're not taken care of? So yes, very, very important.
Yes, thank you. And we are at the top of the hour. So I just want to remind everyone, because most of the questions that are still coming in is just making sure that this information is going to be sent out. So the Word document that Bryn created and the recording will go out to everybody who RSVP'd for this event. So you'll be able to revisit this information and take it in as many times as you need to, because it was a lot of information.
Yes.
Bryn, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you guys so much. And I'll just put my website there in the chat for people. If people want to access it right away while it's at top of mind, you can go access it there, and then we'll send it out too with the recording. So yes, thank you guys. I so appreciate it. I'm sorry if I overwhelmed you with just like drinking from a fire hose, but thank you all for being here. And I'm so grateful. And thank you to Sabrina and to the collaborative as well.